What makes this situation stand out in such a dramatic way is the sheer level of coordination and trust required for a joint military operation between two powerful nations like the United States and Israel. This is not something that happens casually or without deep strategic planning. For an operation like this to take place, there has to be extensive intelligence sharing, where both sides exchange highly sensitive information about targets, timing, defense systems, and potential risks. This kind of cooperation usually develops over years, but when it is activated in real-time conflict, it signals that both sides see the situation as urgent and critical. The complexity of such an operation is also worth understanding. Coordinating airstrikes or military actions across long distances requires precise timing, down to the minute, sometimes even seconds. Aircraft, drones, surveillance systems, and communication networks all have to work in sync. One small mistake in coordination can compromise the entire mission or even put forces at risk. The fact that such an operation was successfully carried out indicates a high level of military capability and preparation from both sides. Another important aspect is the strategic message behind a joint action like this. When one country acts alone, it can sometimes be seen as a limited or isolated decision. But when two major powers come together for a single coordinated strike, it sends a much stronger signal. It shows unity, shared objectives, and a willingness to take significant risks together. This kind of alignment can influence how other countries interpret the situation, as it suggests that the conflict is not just a bilateral issue, but part of a broader strategic stance. There is also a political dimension to consider. Joint military actions require approval and support at the highest levels of government. Leaders must weigh not only the military outcomes, but also the diplomatic consequences. They have to consider how allies will react, how opponents might respond, and how the global community will perceive their actions. Choosing to move forward with such an operation means accepting a high level of international scrutiny and potential backlash. At the operational level, the use of advanced technology plays a crucial role. Modern warfare relies heavily on real-time intelligence, satellite imagery, cyber capabilities, and precision-guided systems. When two technologically advanced militaries combine their resources, the effectiveness of these tools increases significantly. This allows for more accurate targeting and reduces the margin of error, but it also raises the stakes as the impact of each action becomes more significant. The psychological impact of a joint operation like this cannot be ignored either. For the opposing side, it creates the perception of facing not just one adversary, but a coordinated front. This can influence decision-making, increase pressure on leadership, and potentially accelerate responses. At the same time, for allies and observers, it reinforces the idea that strong partnerships are actively shaping the course of the conflict. All of these factors together highlight how a coordinated military action at this level is not just about the immediate strike itself, but about the broader implications it carries in terms of strategy, signaling, and the overall direction of the conflict. One of the most striking and sensitive aspects of this situation is the direct targeting of high-ranking Iranian leadership, which represents a major shift in how conflicts at this level are conducted. In most cases, military actions are focused on infrastructure, weapons systems, or strategic locations. But when leadership itself becomes the target, the nature of the conflict changes significantly. It moves from a conventional military engagement into a much more personal and high-stakes confrontation. Targeting leadership is not just about removing individuals. It is about disrupting the entire chain of command. High-level officials are responsible for decision-making, coordination, and strategic planning. When they are suddenly removed, it can create confusion within the system. Orders may be delayed, communication can break down, and the overall response becomes less organized, at least in the short term. This kind of disruption is often intended to weaken the opponent's ability to react effectively. However, the impact goes beyond immediate military advantages. Leadership figures often carry symbolic and political weight. They are seen as representatives of national strength and authority. When such individuals are targeted and eliminated, it sends a powerful message, not just to the government involved, but also to the population and the international community. It signals that the conflict has reached a level where even the most protected figures are no longer out of reach. There is also a psychological effect on both sides. For the attacking side, successfully carrying out such a precise operation can reinforce confidence in their capabilities. It demonstrates that their intelligence systems are effective and that they can execute complex missions with accuracy. On the other hand, for the side being targeted, it creates a sense of vulnerability. If top leaders can be reached, it raises questions about the safety of other key figures and the overall security structure. At the same time, actions like these carry serious risks. Removing leadership can sometimes lead to unpredictable outcomes. In some cases, it may weaken coordination temporarily, but in others, it can trigger a stronger and more emotional response. New leaders may take a more aggressive stance, seeking to prove strength or respond decisively. This can lead to escalation rather than de-escalation, as decisions become driven by pressure, anger, or the need to maintain authority. There is also the internal impact within the country itself. The loss of key figures can create power shifts, as different groups or individuals attempt to fill the gap. This can lead to internal tension, competition, or even instability, depending on how the situation is managed. At the same time, it can also unify the population under a sense of shared loss, strengthening resolve rather than weakening it. From an international perspective, targeting leadership draws significant attention and reaction. Other countries closely observe such actions because they set precedents. It raises questions about how far conflicts can go and what limits, if any, still exist. This can influence how other nations prepare for similar scenarios, adjusting their own security measures and strategies. All of these elements show that targeting leadership is not just a tactical decision, but a strategic move with wide-ranging consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment of the strike. The scale of destruction inflicted on military capabilities in a short span of time is one of the most defining features of this situation, and it reflects how modern warfare has evolved into something far more precise and high impact than in the past. Instead of prolonged ground battles, much of the damage is now delivered through targeted strikes aimed at disabling key systems that a country relies on for defense and retaliation. In this case, a significant portion of missile launchers, storage facilities, and operational infrastructure has reportedly been hit, reducing the immediate ability to launch large-scale attacks. What makes this kind of destruction so impactful is the strategic value of these targets. Missile systems are not just weapons. They are a core part of a country's deterrence strategy. They represent the ability to respond quickly and powerfully if attacked. When a large percentage of these systems are taken out, it doesn't just reduce firepower, it changes the balance of confidence between both sides. The side that loses these capabilities may find it harder to project strength in the short term, while the opposing side may feel it has gained a temporary advantage. However, the situation is rarely as simple as it appears on the surface. Military capabilities are often spread out, hidden, or designed with redundancy in mind. Even if a large number of systems are destroyed, there are usually backup resources, alternative launch methods, or undisclosed stockpiles that can still be used. This means that while the visible damage may be significant, the actual ability to respond may still exist in ways that are not immediately clear. Another important factor is adaptation. When a country faces heavy losses in conventional systems, it often begins to shift its strategy. Instead of relying on large, easily targeted infrastructure, it may move towards smaller, more mobile units, or use different forms of warfare such as drones, cyber operations, or indirect tactics. These methods can be harder to detect and counter, making the conflict more unpredictable and complex. The speed at which this destruction occurs also adds to its impact. In earlier conflicts, reducing an opponent's military strength could take weeks or months of sustained operations. Now, with advanced surveillance, precision-guided weapons, and real-time intelligence, a significant portion of military infrastructure can be damaged within hours or days. This rapid shift can catch the opposing side off guard, forcing them to react under pressure without sufficient time to reorganize. There is also a psychological dimension tied to large-scale destruction. Seeing key military assets destroyed can affect morale, both within the armed forces and among the general population. It can create a perception of vulnerability, even if the overall capacity to fight remains intact. At the same time, it can also fuel determination, pushing leadership and forces to respond more aggressively in order to demonstrate resilience. From a broader perspective, the destruction of military capabilities does not necessarily bring a conflict closer to resolution. In many cases, it marks the beginning of a new phase, where the nature of the conflict shifts rather than ends. The focus moves from conventional strength to strategic flexibility, from visible power to less predictable forms of response, adding new layers of complexity to an already intense situation. The speed and scale of retaliation in this situation is what makes it especially concerning, because it shows that the response is not only immediate, but also expanding beyond a single location or target. When a country reacts this quickly after being struck, it signals that it was either prepared for such a scenario or that it has the capability to mobilize its forces without delay. This kind of rapid response reduces the chances of de-escalation, as there is little to no pause between action and reaction. What stands out even more is the geographical spread of the retaliation. Instead of limiting the response to one specific area, attacks are being reported across multiple locations, including strategic sites and positions linked to opposing forces. This indicates that the conflict is no longer confined to a single battlefield. As the range of targets increases, so does the complexity of the situation, because more regions and assets become involved, each carrying its own strategic importance. The use of different types of weapons also adds another layer to this expansion. Retaliation is not limited to one method. It can involve missiles, drones, and other forms of attack that serve different purposes. Missiles may be used for direct impact and visible damage, while drones can be used for precision targeting or surveillance before strikes. This combination allows for a more flexible and sustained response, making it harder for the opposing side to predict the next move. Another key element is the signaling behind such retaliation. Every strike is not just about damage, it is also about sending a message. By responding quickly and across multiple fronts, a country demonstrates that it still has the capability and willingness to fight back despite the initial losses it may have suffered. This is important not only for its own internal stability, but also for maintaining its position in the eyes of allies and adversaries. At the same time, expanding retaliation increases the risk of involving additional parties. When attacks reach different regions, they may affect not just the primary opponents, but also other countries or groups operating nearby. This creates a situation where unintended consequences become more likely, as a strike aimed at one target could impact another, leading to further reactions and potentially drawing more players into the conflict. There is also the challenge of defense. As retaliation spreads, defending against it becomes more difficult. Multiple targets across different locations require resources to be divided, making it harder to provide full protection everywhere. This can lead to vulnerabilities, where some areas may be less protected than others, increasing the overall risk of damage. In such a rapidly evolving environment, the continuous cycle of action and response begins to shape the direction of the conflict. Each new wave of retaliation not only adds to the immediate impact, but also influences the decisions that come next, creating a situation where the conflict grows in both scale and intensity with every passing moment. The rise in global tension and the shift toward heightened military alert is one of the clearest signs that this situation is being taken extremely seriously at the highest levels around the world. When a conflict reaches this stage, it is no longer seen as a localized issue. Governments across different regions begin to reassess their own security positions, even if they are not directly involved. This is because the potential consequences of escalation could extend far beyond the immediate area of conflict. One of the first responses seen globally is the increase in military readiness. Armed forces may be placed on standby, air defense systems activated, and naval fleets repositioned closer to strategic zones. These moves are often described as precautionary, but they also reflect a level of concern that the situation could evolve quickly. When multiple countries begin adjusting their military posture at the same time, it creates an environment where tension is not just felt, it is visibly building. There is also a significant increase in surveillance and intelligence activity. Countries start closely monitoring movements, communications, and developments related to the conflict. Satellites, reconnaissance missions, and cyber monitoring all play a role in gathering real-time information. This constant flow of intelligence is essential for decision-making, but it also highlights how uncertain and fluid the situation has become. When information is changing rapidly, strategies must be adjusted just as quickly. Diplomatic channels also come under pressure during such moments. Governments engage in urgent discussions with allies, hold emergency meetings, and attempt to coordinate responses. However, as tension rises, these conversations can become more complex. Different countries may have different priorities, and aligning those priorities in a fast-moving crisis is not always easy. This can lead to delays or disagreements, which further adds to the overall uncertainty. Public communication becomes another critical factor. Leaders must address their populations, providing updates while also trying to maintain calm. At the same time, they must be careful about what information is shared, as revealing too much could have strategic implications. This balance between transparency and caution is difficult to maintain, especially when the situation is evolving in real time. The presence of military forces in close proximity also increases the risk of accidental encounters. When aircraft, ships, or ground units from different countries operate in nearby areas, the chances of unintended interactions grow. Even a small incident, such as a misidentified object or a navigation error, can quickly escalate if it is interpreted as a hostile act. In a tense environment, there is very little room for such mistakes. All of these factors contribute to a global atmosphere where decisions are made under pressure. Actions are closely watched, and the margin for error becomes extremely narrow. The higher the level of alert, the greater the sensitivity to every movement, making the situation more intense with each passing development. The sense that the world is standing on the edge of a larger conflict comes from the way multiple high-risk factors are coming together at the same time, creating a situation where even a small trigger could have far-reaching consequences. When tensions reach this level, it is no longer just about what has already happened, but about what could happen next. Every action is analyzed not only for its immediate impact, but also for how it might influence the next move in an already fragile chain of events. One of the main reasons for this growing concern is the involvement of powerful nations with significant military capabilities. When countries with advanced weapons, global influence, and established alliances become directly or indirectly engaged, the stakes increase dramatically. These are not isolated actors. Their decisions carry weight across regions, and their actions can influence the behavior of other nations. This interconnectedness means that any escalation has the potential to spread beyond its original boundaries. Another critical factor is the narrowing space for de-escalation. In the early stages of a conflict, there are often opportunities for dialogue, mediation, or temporary pauses. But as the situation intensifies, with strikes, counterstrikes, and rising casualties, those opportunities begin to shrink. Positions become more rigid, public statements become stronger, and backing down becomes more difficult for leaders who are under pressure to show strength and resolve. There is also the element of unpredictability that makes the situation even more unstable. In highly tense environments, decisions are sometimes made quickly and under stress. Leaders must respond to rapidly changing developments, often with limited time to fully assess all possible outcomes. This increases the likelihood of actions that may have unintended consequences, which can then trigger further reactions in a continuous cycle. The role of alliances adds another layer of complexity. Many countries are tied together through defense agreements or strategic partnerships. If one country becomes heavily involved, its allies may feel obligated to support it, whether through military assistance, logistical support, or political backing. This can gradually expand the scale of the conflict, turning a regional issue into a broader international confrontation. At the same time, the global environment is already sensitive due to existing economic pressures, political divisions, and security concerns. A major conflict in such a context can act as a catalyst, intensifying existing problems while creating new ones. This combination of internal and external pressures makes the situation more volatile and harder to stabilize. All of these elements together create a scenario where the line between a regional conflict and a wider global crisis becomes increasingly thin, with each new development adding to the uncertainty and raising the stakes even further.